Hello there everybody, my name is Boomer Brown and welcome to episode 2 of Kerbal Space Program Retrograde, where I still seem to be having some trouble with getting the correct mission flag to display. It is a thing that it kind of shows up sometimes and doesn't on other occasions. Perhaps the Kerbals are taking it down and putting it in the wash. Maybe they only have one flag. At any rate, we are launching atop some KW rocketry boosters a mission that is going to fly by the moon. We have loaded it up with the latest in Kerbal scientific instrumentation. Now this thing isn't going to actually land on the moon. It is simply going to fly by and return to Kerbal with a bounty full of science. Now, as we separate the boosters and continue on with this liquid fuel engine, I don't actually think that's one of the KW rocketry engines. I think that is one of the stock engines. At any rate, I'm sure you're probably wondering what happened to Jebediah Kerman, because at the end of the last episode he was languishing in orbit and getting ready to return safely as a hero. I can inform you that Jebediah did make the return journey safely. However, I managed to lose the footage. I also lost the footage of a small suborbital flight down to the South Pole, where Jebediah carried out a couple of scientific experiments, and we've managed to recover that mission as well, though the footage of that is obviously missing as well. So we are flying a pretty standard launch maneuver here. I did seem to burn a little more fuel on this than I would have liked, although the orbit does seem to be flattening out quite nicely. And we jettison the fairing and leave the booster behind on a suborbital trajectory to be burnt up in the atmosphere, if burning up was a thing in version 0.24. And here you see me attempting to extend the antennas and the dishes. These are, well, they're not purely cosmetic. We would need them if we were going to transmit any of the data back, but because we don't have Kerbal, not Kerbal attachment, remote tech installed, the functionality of these is much diminished. And here we go, we are about to circularize our orbit. I decided to fly this manually, just tickling the apoapses there, and I actually get into a pretty circular orbit, if I do say so myself. And then we just get our maneuver nodes set up to get a burn out to the moon, and take a look at it in here. And I seem to, I wasn't sure if I was going to try to get something of a free return trajectory, and so I think I just went for a standard flight path there, heading out towards the moon. We may as well take a temperature reading as we prepare to go up, and the dish has folded in. We've also got some solar panels on the side there that we will need to keep orientated towards the sun. And just skipping forward, I delete the maneuver node and start to thrust once the moon has risen. In fact, I probably could have gone a little bit earlier there. Usually if you wait for moonrise, it just works out that you should be able to get an encounter just by thrusting in the general, just by thrusting prograde. And it tends to wobble a little bit even as we're turning around. This is something that seems to have been patched out of the game as later versions have come online, where the maneuvers and the encounters tend to wiggle around a bit with the patch conics. Definitely something of an issue in older versions of the game. And here we see something of a bug that I've been having with the thermometer. As I said, this is an older version of the game, and bugs are going to be a thing. Most of these, of course, have been patched out as time has moved on. We get a little solar eclipse, but yeah, the thermometer seems to be unable to seems to lose functionality if we try to take a temperature scan where we cannot take a temperature scan. And so I warp into the sphere of influence of the moon and begin the science spam for High Over the Moon. Incidentally, I did time warp through the sphere of influence change there, and that is going to have a bearing on things a little bit later on. I don't think it's quite so bad nowadays, but certainly in older versions, time warping over a sphere of influence change was something you really didn't want to do. As you can see, the same bug is persisting with the thermometers, so we may have two non-functional thermometers on this probe at this point. And at any rate, I think we're going to warp in towards the surface of the moon, get ourselves down to periapsis, and start getting some of the low science. And here we come in over the surface, dropping back the time warp because we are coming close to our periapsis. And just checking the time to periapsis, I realise we have something of a problem. We are on an impact trajectory with the moon, and luckily I spotted it in time and was able to rectify the situation. I think it was to do with the warping over the sphere of influence change. It's not something you want to do in earlier versions of Kerbal. I don't think it's as much of an issue nowadays, but a little bit of fuel. We have plenty of Delta V aboard this vessel, and we bring ourselves up to just over 7 kilometers, which should be low enough to grab some of the low over moon signs without actually crashing the probe into it. And so we are just going to get it down. Look at that. The craters look spectacular, gliding gracefully over the surface of the moon. And I think we are pretty much low enough, so we're going to chance a mystery goo. And yes, I cannot actually read these as they're coming up. This is all post commentary because I didn't feel like recording a live commentary for this, so I am trying to fill things in and try to remember what I was doing, and my display is a little bit too small at the moment, so I can't actually read off any of those science messages. And I think that pretty much concludes it. Yeah, that thermometer is still broken, but the other one did seem to start working again. So we are getting ready to make our return to Kerbal. I think I try to adjust the orbit here low over the moon, but ultimately I think what I do is I just decide to wait until we get out of the moon's SOI and reach apoapsis, and then make a correction to send us home. A free return trajectory would probably have been a little bit better of a move here, though we would have spent a little bit more Delta V close to Kerbal to get it to happen, unless we were able to tweak the timing of our burn just right. It has been a while since I have played, and I'm sure that I'm going to be making quite a few mistakes as we go along, but disasters do make for exciting gameplay. As we reach our apoapsis and we get ready to make our burn to reduce ourselves down, I think I'm aiming for about 24 kilometers. We don't have to actually worry about re-entry heating here, because of course earlier versions of the game don't have that. The re-entry effects are purely cosmetic, and we get ourselves down to about 19, and I tweak it a little bit. You can see me spinning the craft. This is actually a very capable probe, and I think that it might be worth sending a similar mission out to Minmus. You also see me messing around with Kerbal alarm clock there. I think I'm checking to see if it cancels the time warp successfully, and you can see the maneuver node there oscillating around as we make our way in. Again, that is a function of the old patched conics that were in use in earlier versions of the game, which did make encountering things a little bit hit or miss, but as I say, it has gotten a lot better as time has gone on, and so now we are hitting the upper atmosphere of Kerbal and we are starting to slow down. I'm going to retract the antennas. As I said, they have been mostly a cosmetic thing, just putting them on for completeness. And we are about to begin our descent at great speed. I can't actually read it off there. But we are coming in, our horizontal speed at least is 2 kilometers per second. So it is pretty decent. And of course the risk is that we will end up landing in the water, but we seem to be coming in over this continent here, so it's either going to be a desert landing or a mountain landing. We are slowing down quite quickly, and I decided that I may as well expend the fuel that we have left and jettison that booster. The other risk now is that we are going to destroy the materials bay on landing. I have popped 2 parachutes onto that and I've just deployed them there. So we are coming down and we should touch down, hopefully softly enough that we do not damage or destroy those experiments, because it'll mean that we were going to have to send another mission out there to grab some of that science. And we've collected yet another contract. Interestingly enough, we haven't got any contracts to explore the moon just yet. So we're not going to get any funds out of this. And we drop out of time acceleration as we make our way down for a final landing. Now we are landing on a bit of a slope. I think it's something like 25 degrees. So there is going to be a risk, as long as we don't destroy the materials bay, of us flipping over. So I engage the SAS and ever so carefully, by manipulating the controls, try to gently lower this thing onto its side, and it survived. So barring it rolling away or sliding down the hill, the Kerbals should be safely able to recover this vessel. And recover it we do, and we get a bounty of science that we will spend in the R&D Centre. Jumping forward, we have flown the same mission out to Minmus. We have done a little flyby using the same probe and returned with even more science. I decided to cut that out because the video was getting a little bit long and it was time to do something a little bit different. So we are heading back towards Minmus, and the launch window isn't exactly perfect, but I think we will be able to cancel out an awful lot of the relative inclination. Of course, the way to do this is to wait. The way to launch this, I should say, is to wait until the launch site is somewhere around the ascending or descending node of the orbit of Minmus. It is very slightly inclined with respect to the axis of rotation of Kerbal. But nevertheless, I launch and attempt to brute force it a little bit. I think we get down to about 0.7 degrees, so that's not too bad of an inclination at all. And so yeah, this is going to be our first lander mission. I've decided to target Minmus because we've already been out to the moon and seen what's going on out there. And in fact, Minmus is something of an easier body to try and land on. The lower gravity, it has got pretty similar delta V requirements as going to the moon, but the gravity is a lot lower and it is a lot easier to land on. As we fly the pretty similar launch profile to the last time, though we do seem to have a little bit more fuel left in that initial boost stage, which will no doubt help us as we get up and try to make a burn towards Minmus. And we jettison the fairing. As you see, we have unlocked the Probodobodine Octo at this stage. I think that's the Probodobodine Octo. I'm not entirely sure. And we have slapped some materials bay and some mystery goo and thermometer on that. We haven't yet unlocked some of the higher tier science experiments. So we do have a barometer, but there's not a hell of a lot of point in taking that with us since there is no atmosphere on Minmus. Although I think in later versions of the game, I think certainly after 1.0, the barometer would provide you with some science on bodies that didn't have an atmosphere, which was a little bit strange, I thought. But nevertheless, it is part of the game, and or rather it is not part of the game in this version, and so I'm not taking it with me. So I set myself up with a maneuver and we start to turn the spacecraft. It's a little bit harder to turn with that booster on there, but I'm reluctant to jettison it just yet, because we're going to use that to make the most of our Delta V. We're going to use that to make our insertion, and perhaps we'll be able to tweak our orbit a little bit as we get out closer to Minmus. And just watching the sunset there. In fact, I even hide the HUD there just to get a beauty shot. So time warping around to our burn, and we have a small little correction to make to our orientation. And just as the sun starts to crest the planet, we are igniting our engines and making our burn out to Minmus. I do tend to focus my view on the target in question. It's something that I started to do, and it seems to work out pretty well for me. So again, I'm setting up Kerbal alarm clock, and I'm assuming it's for the SOI change, though I'm not entirely sure. It went a little bit fast there, though I'm sure it went fast for you too, unless you want to pause it. And look at that. Beautiful probe slipping away from Kerbal, and there we see the big impact crater on the surface of Kerbal. So yeah, it looks like I am going to do something of a mid-course correction here to try and get something of a better orbit, something a little equatorial. I think what I end up with is something slightly inclined, though that is no bad thing. Coming in over the poles is quite useful, because if you wait long enough you will pass over every location on the surface within reason, and it really does help you to pick your landing site. But I think what I do is I finagle it around and get us down to about 7 kilometers there, though I think when I actually go to make the burn, it doesn't quite work out that well. I'm not entirely sure. Oh yes, that's right, I have decided that this booster is going to be left as debris unless I try to do something about it, and I reckon that I have enough Delta V in the stage to attempt to launch it towards the surface of Minmus and let it impact and be destroyed, rather than cluttering up space. So this is a very tiny maneuver, so I'm limiting the thrust on that engine just to give myself a little bit more control. Again, that engine isn't entirely the correct engine to be using in deep space. That is more of an atmospheric engine as opposed to a space engine, the bell being that bit narrower. And so I begin the burn. I think I begin the burn a little bit off time, and or perhaps I overcook it a little, because yeah, I think I go for that. And you can see the maneuver node system isn't quite, or the patch conic system isn't quite sure what to do. It's not sure if it's going to impact it at one point or another, but it does seem to be on an impact trajectory, and still we have a little bit of fuel in that stage. And there we get our alarm clock. Is that for our SOI change? Yeah, I think I'm searching for Minmus, and we are about an hour out, and so we just kind of time warp in, and once again I managed to warp over the SOI change. But it is time to relieve ourselves of this booster and hopefully make the craft a little bit more maneuverable. I decided to point at retrograde, and of course we now have to correct our orbit. I should have probably spent a little bit more time on that, but as I say, a slightly inclined orbit will give us a lot more choice when it comes time to picking a landing site, so I just run with that, and we count down the time to the maneuver in question, and we can see our booster making its way away from us, heading on an impact trajectory with Minmus, the pudding moon as we call it, made of ice cream, mint ice cream I think it is made of, or at least that's what the Kerbals like to believe. And so we just have a little orbital insertion burn to make there, and there we can see we're time warping in, and we can see the path that the booster is making I'm not sure if we're going to actually see it impact the moon or not. We are, because I decided to orientate the camera. It would be nice to follow that down, but I do not think that I have the time to switch to it and switch back and successfully put this thing into orbit. And there it goes, plop into the moon, showering it with debris. The first impact on an alien body. And we are coming in, we're coming down, and it is time to start getting ourselves set up for the insertion burn. And nicely done, we have a nice orbit, a little bit more inclined than we would like, and I noticed that we are pretty close to passing over this crater, and it's going to be a while before we pass over anything like that again. And these ice planes are really rather useful for landing on. They're quite flat, in fact they're perfectly flat, and I think if you do not have Kerbal Engineer installed, they register sea level as 0, so if you're simply using the normal altimeter that comes with the stock game, as far as I know, 0 meters is equivalent to the surface of these lowlands on Minmus, these ice planes on Minmus. And so I'm killing out my lateral velocity and very carefully making my way down, making sure that I turn the solar panels to face the sun, where they'll be able to generate some electricity. Delta V is, I'm probably burning up a little bit more fuel than I would like on this one. The little bit of an inclination change kind of used up a little bit there, and I probably could do with burning a little bit less. It is better to kill it off all in one burn, but I'm getting a bit nervous because I'm not noticing a shadow and I can't really see where the ground starts. And there we go, a successful landing. We are wobbling very slightly, but as I said, it doesn't appear to be any shadow cast by the spacecraft, so that was making it a little bit difficult as I was coming down. Oh no, wait, we haven't touched down yet at all. I have, as I said, this is post-commentary, and I am not entirely sure what is going on, so I'm kind of making this up as I go along. Anyway, we are still on approach, and I am trying to null out the velocity here, our vertical velocity. And we're picking up a little bit of horizontal as well, and I'm possibly burning a little bit too much fuel as we come down there. We can see the dust starting to kick up and touch down. I'm going to leave the SAS on for a while because the space probe seems to want to wobble a little bit. And look at that glorious view. I think that is sunrise. Yeah, because we came in from the west. So yeah, that must be the sunrise on Minmus as opposed to the sunset. And just look at that, our first probe touching down on an alien world. It is an impressive thing, and I always enjoy landing on these bodies, especially the moon, and conducting missions out there. It is quite spectacular. As I pan around and get some more beauty shots, I think it is time to get down to business and start getting some of the science from the surface of Minmus. So we're going to observe the materials bay, and I cannot read that message because it is far too small on my display. Something about hungry. No doubt the surface of Minmus is making the Kerbals think of ice cream. So we're going to do some mystery goos as well, and we're just going to click on that. And I think it says you observe the goo, the standard mission, or the standard science flavor text there, and we're going to log a temperature as well. Getting plenty of science from this mission, so it will be an absolute boon when we manage to recover this and get it back onto the surface. Just checking through the vessel again, I think it is possible to make our way back with this amount of fuel. But I think that is something that I will do in the next episode. So with that being said, I am going to say thank you very much for tuning in. You have been watching Bloomer Brown on YouTube, and I will see you next time.